Recording in progress.
Thank you for joining us for this October 16th meeting of the Humboldt County Association of Governments. At this time, we'll call this meeting to order, and can I get a roll call?
Chair Johnson,
Here.
Supervisor Wilson,
Presente.
Mayor Sawatsky,
Here.
Mayor Burgell,
Here.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar,
Here.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Kenny, Councilmember Orr, Pack Member Arroyo,
Here.
Pack Member Allstrand.
Here.
Thank you. And at this time, our first item of business is to adjourn as the HCOG board and convene as the Policy Advisory Committee. And at this time, we will ask for public comment on non-agenda items. Is there anybody that would like to speak on items not on the agenda? I see none. So we come to presentations, and a presentation on the Humboldt Transit Authority and Measure O by PAC member and Supervisor Arroyo.
Thank you, everyone. I think there's been some interest from the HCOG board in hearing about how the Measure O transit allocations were allocated. Were made by the board of the Humboldt Transit Authority. So I wanted to make sure to share that out with you all because there's very little overlap between the two. And then I don't want to spring this on Amy, but are we also going to have the video available? Okay, we're going to try to show the video. It's a short video that HTA made also about the new hydrogen bus, and it's very lovely. If we can't show it today, we can always do it another time. So shall I just say advance? Okay, let's go ahead and go through. So these are some of the specific items that Humboldt Transit Authority will be doing with the Measure O funds. The replacement of 240-foot buses. So while there is a move to electric and hydrogen buses, particularly hydrogen, because of the range needs of the fleet, there are still some aging buses that are at the end of their service life or past it that need to be replaced with existing bus technology, or I guess I shouldn't say existing, with diesel buses. And this is to the tune of $1.5 million, and that's to increase frequency of service and address some of those aging concerns. Next, please. All right, so Humboldt Transit Authority, I think y'all are aware, but we have taken over the implementation of the dial-a-ride driving, and we previously already did the dispatching and the maintenance of vehicles, but now have the vehicles within our fleet and are providing the drivers. So adding additional vehicles and improving on-demand responsiveness for that fleet and combining dial-a-ride services with on-demand services is something that's going to increase operational hours and have a yearly cost, but it's fairly modest, and that was an efficiency improvement for Humboldt Transit Authority. Next, please. All right, this one's really exciting, and it's been something that comes up in unmet transit needs and in the transit development plan and other community input throughout the year, around the year round. Is late night and early morning service particularly on weekdays. So increasing the earlier service hours and evening hours to help with commuters and those who want to get around using the bus earlier and later. So those increased costs are shown here. And that's on the RTS routes. Thanks, Amy. Next slide, please. And then the Route 101. So this is addressing a previous gap between Benbow and Willits. So you used to be able to ride the bus to Benbow, and then there was a gap between those two destinations. And this route is operating now, but this is to continue it and to continue providing that service, which has been an important connection, especially with the loss of the bus service that we lost from the Greyhound. Thank you. Una's helping. Much appreciated. All right, next slide. I was blanking on the name of the service because it's gone. All right. And then we have our Route 299. And I should say North State Express is also a broader collaborative amongst transit operators throughout the north part of the state. And it's really comprehensive. It's something that's eventually going to knit together a lot of transit providers far beyond our county and our region, but really thinking about connectivity for a lot of the most rural part of the state. And that's being really spearheaded by Humboldt Transit Authority with support from Caltrans and support from other transit operators. But it's really a vision that our general manager has really been working hard on with the support of our board. So it's something that goes beyond the 101 and 299 routes, but those are the ones that we're responsible for. So reducing that westbound travel time from 8 to 4 hours. So making it much more frequent and easier to get to points east. And so those costs are shown there. And I should also note that I think folks here have talked about it before, but there's quite a ridership from between Willow Creek and Arcata of students. So high school students that commute every single day of the week to go to school in Arcata. And the bus is full on the morning and after school run. And that's providing essentially it's functioning like a school bus, but students are coming in a great numbers for that. All right, next.
Can I ask a quick question about that one?
Sure.
I missed it. Did you say I know there's been a route as the express route. Is that new? Are you adding?
It's reducing the travel time by coordinating with the other agencies. So when I say the Willow Creek route is fully Humboldt Transit Authority operated, but when people are going to connect to Reading, for example, that connection time has been reduced. So that really helped with the timing so that people aren't waiting for long periods of time between connections.
Thank you.
All right. Eureka Transit Service is a robust system, has a lot of riders, and it's expensive to run. So this is maintenance of operations, which is really the wording of Measure O on the ballot was focused around operations and being able to maintain the services for, people with disabilities and seniors in particular. And so this is a expense that helps to maintain that. All right, this one's another operational cost need for the Southern Humboldt Intercity. So that's the service that goes between destinations in Southern Humboldt. Next. I should have mentioned the exciting part. It's not really highlighted in these slides, but that Southern Humboldt Intercity is actually an expansion of service. There's a greater service hours that coincide with that later night RTS service as well. And so the total was $3.6 million. And I thought folks would be interested to hear about that and what the true costs of providing expanded service and continuing operations are.
Okay, thanks for
Thanks.
that update and looking at what the cost is. But is there any questions or comments from the board? No. Any public comment on this item and the Measure O work plan for HTA? Okay.
I just want to ask if the video is a possibility. Is it? That's okay. We'll do it another month. It'll keep the excitement going. Yes. And we will adjust them. It's a projection, so those were a little bit on the conservative side. Yeah.
Is there a capital expense plan to continue to retire older buses, inefficient buses for new ones, or is that a one year, the 1.6?
This was really just the time when those buses needed to be replaced. They were overdue. The bulk of the buses coming into the fleet will be hydrogen. So there are quite a few that are going to be in that production cycle. So most of them we hope to replace with zero emission vehicles, but those were a short term stopgap need.
Okay.
I mean, they'll still fulfill their useful life, but
yeah, they
yes.
got a ways to go yet.
Yeah. Thanks. Sure. I think they're going to come yell at you and tell you your mic's not on in just a moment.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So
it's
just to confirm,
Yeah.
we were going with hydrogen buses because they can travel greater distances than the
Yeah.
electrical buses.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So the range needs, and that's part of the, and since you're not always the board member here, I'll make sure that you get it by email too. But that's part of what the video talks about is the hydrogen being a solution for a rural community that has those longer range needs.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Probably a much better performer on the run to Willow Creek and back too.
Yes, and it's been tested on the all the different routes and really overperformed the even anticipated performance. And it was a specially designed bus model made just for us, which is now being made available to other rural transit agencies that have those like range needs like ours. It was both the range and grade, so a lot of buses aren't going up the mountains that ours are, up and down. So those were some of the considerations. So it's actually a larger tank than was previously available on the market, and it was designed for our needs. So we were really innovators in that, but other agencies are already ordering those same buses. So it's cool to see.
All right. Well, thank you for
Thank
that
you.
update. We had no public comment there, so we'll move to the consent calendar. And we have one item on the consent calendar, the meeting record from September 18th. Does anybody wish to pull that or comment on that? Is there any public comment on this consent calendar? Well, we'll entertain a motion.
Move to, go ahead. Move to approve consent.
Second, anybody?
I'll second it.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Okay, so now we're moved to our action items. And the first item is a Transportation TDA Act, Article 3, Bike and Ped 2% allocation for City of Blue Lake. Some modification.
Yes, thank you, Chair Johnson. So, as the board probably recalls, every year we do our 2% TDA bike and ped allocations for local agencies. That's a competitive proposal process that comes through annually when there is capacity within the TDA and we're not trying to backfill our reserves. And in 2024, the City of Blue Lake, through the recommendation of the TAC and the approval of the board, was authorized about $34,000 to complete some traffic calming improvements within the city. Since that time, unfortunately, priorities change when emergencies come around, and recently they found some issues on one of their non-motorized bridges that's part of their Safe Routes to School pathway that compelled the city to have to get in there and make some emergency repairs to the bridge and to get everything safe. And that emergency repair project, ultimately, which has been completed at this point, cost them about $50,000. So with, of course, competing priorities and lower budget amounts, the City of Blue Lake is requesting to be able to shift the use of those funds from the previous project, which I believe were mini roundabouts at I Street and J Street, our G Street and to shift that to the emergency repairs that were required on the bike and ped bridge on their safe routes to school. So the city of Blue Lake made the request a little bit of time ago. It has gone to the TAC for their review, and they are recommending the change of those funds from the original project to the emergency repair project. They only have until the end of this year to invoice against those funds, but they've already completed the emergency repairs. So with board approval, they would be able to instantly move out and complete, or not complete the work, but complete the invoicing. And then that covers pretty much everything. So if the board has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And of course, the recommendation from the TAC is that the board approve the transfer of funds from the first project to the emergency repair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board?
Just a comment that I think it's good to, that the member entities have the flexibility to amend their priorities when, you know, situations, emergencies come up. So I'm in favor of it.
And I will note the thing that kind of skipped my brain there at the last minute is we, of course, have reviewed it, and it's an eligible activity under the TDA rules. So, you know, it continues to be something that is eligible for that. And one of the larger priorities we try to do with that fund is to make sure that, let's say, emergency improvements or really critical needs in the bike and ped system come up, that funding can be leveraged for it. So it very much meets the intent of the funding.
Thank you. Any public comment on this item? I see none. It's in keeping with the rules, so I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that the PAC recommend the HCOG board approve the modification to the 2024 2% TDA funding request from the city of Blue Lake.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So we come now to a consultant selection for partnering assets and authorities for comprehensive transit planning project.
Hello. Greetings, PAC. All right, so for those of you who forgot about it, we applied with very many of our partners locally for a sustainable transportation planning grant, the program, which is a Caltrans planning grant. The program under that is Strategic Partnerships for Transit. We were awarded that and have now gotten MOUs with almost all of our official sub-applicant partners in that. And the partnership of 9 entities, including HCOG, is one of, if not the largest partnership grants that Caltrans has ever done. So I think they're very excited about that. We're very proud about that, but we also know it's going to be a lot of administrative work, but I am looking forward to it. So HCOG is the lead, HTA is the secondary applicant, and then we have 7 sub-applicants. And this grant allows us to allocate funds to staff for their time working on this. And all of the sub-applicants, save for one, are getting grant funds. The city of Eureka opted out of actually getting reimbursements, but they are also contributing to the local match. So all the partners include, other than HCOG and HTA, it's the Trinidad Rancheria, the Yurok Tribe, County Planning and Building, and then 4 cities, Arcata, Blue Lake, Eureka, and Trinidad. And in a major summary, the 3 major goals are strengthening working relationships and also local expertise for for planning, land use, and transit together. And some things for making a very robust transit, they just don't wiggle if your land use isn't right. So this project is also a way to have subject experts, and we have a very renowned consultant group on this, for them to facilitate with our local staff and officials and commissioners, and then also the public, about what it takes in working relationships, in government policy, and just in the physical nuts and bolts to get comprehensive transit region-wide. So we received 7 proposals representing 12 different firms who were interested in this. We had a scoring committee of 5 people, one HCOG staff, someone from our Social Services Transportation Advisory Council, someone from the Trinidad Rancheria, and county planning. And the way the scores broke out are in your staff report, but it was easy to come to consensus with them that they all recommend the DKS team, which also includes Jarrett Walker and Associates, which is very, very well known in the field of transit planning, and also GHD, which includes 2 of our staff from the local Eureka office. So staff is recommending to receive public comment, and the motion that is on your staff report, but we are not recommending action number 3. That was a typographical error that agencies would present their proposals. And that is it for my staff report summary.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you, Una. I just had a question. I mean, this looks amazing and really thorough. In part of their proposal, they talked about a project steering working group, and I was just wondering. I was curious, what type of people would be on that group?
That is the long name that I gave to the sub-applicants. So that is all the local staff. And then there is room to have another official committee if other stakeholders and the public find that they want to do that.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense.
Any other questions or comments for Una? Any public comment on this item? Well, see none.
I'm happy to make the motion. That's
Yes,
if we're ready for that.
I believe we're ready for that.
All right, hold on. I'm just looking at the thing here. Well, I'll just go with staff recommendation. How about that? Except for item 3, which is a typo. That's my motion.
That's your motion.
Yep.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. So we have a unanimous motion there. So thank you for that. And we move to discussion items with the STIP and RTIP update.
Yes, thank you, Chair Johnson. So we have in front of you tonight a discussion item on the TAC recommendation for the upcoming 2026 STIP funding, which is part of the RTIP, or the Regional Transportation Improvement Plan process. So conventionally, this would come in November as part of the draft RTIP itself, which is the actual plan that HCOG puts together to submit to the CTC by December. But given that the TAC just had their discussion and there's the opportunity to bring this piece of it forward and make sure that the board is understanding of the projects that the member agencies put forward and some of the funding recommendations, we thought it prudent to bring that forward before the actual RTIP itself. So again, this is a discussion item. We're looking for any direction or any thoughts or to answer any questions the board might have. We'll talk about it at the end of the presentation, but this will come back to the board in November as the recommendation to approve the draft Regional Transportation Improvement Plan. Okay. So for anybody unfamiliar or folks in the public who have not seen this before, we throw these acronyms around all the time, but this one is the STIP, which stands for the State Transportation Improvement Program. Basically, what that is a biennial 5-year plan for road improvements, which is a mouthful to figure out. But basically, every 2 years, we have a new programming cycle for 5 years of programmed funding. So if you could imagine, it's somewhere in between a budget and a capital improvement program that are done by any one of the local agencies. It's done every 2 years on even years. So we consider these in 2022, 24, 26, and so on. And we actually do the work and the funding recommendations in the odd years preceding those. So 21, 23, and now 2025. So a couple of other items. It is funded by the state highway account through Caltrans, which is part of fuel tax revenues. And for a project to be programmed in the RTIP and eligible for STIP funding, it needs to be listed in an MPO or RTPA's most recent Regional Transportation Plan, or RTP. So just to give you an idea of the types of projects and really to look back on some of the really excellent projects that have moved forward in previous STIP cycles, before we jump into the TAC recommendation, I just want to get the board again up to speed on some of the projects that have been included in some previous cycles. So 2024, which is the last STIP programming cycle that was completed prior to this, recommended projects included Arcata's Sunset Avenue Interchange Improvement Project, which with the grant funding they received earlier last year, I believe it was, is now going to be moving forward into its construction phase before too long. For the county, that included projects on Hubbard Lane and the Garberville Complete Streets Project. For the city of Eureka, that included additional funding for the Bay Trail project, in addition to the restoration work that was recently done on Myrtle Ave. In Fortuna, that included design funding for the Kenmar Interchange Improvement Project. In 2022, Trinidad saw some funding to do some pavement restoration on Trinity Street. Blue Lake saw some funding to do phase 1 of their truck route project, which is now complete. City of Fortuna saw funding to do their 12th Street Interchange Improvement Project. Rio Dell to do some pedestrian connectivity work by doing sidewalk infills. In Arcata, again, to do a phase of their Sunset Interchange project. And then lastly, as our blast to the past continues, in 2018 and 2020, that was work programmed for Fortuna's Redwood Way and Kenmar Interchange Improvement Program project. The Old Arcata Road project, which was completed last year, that was about 50% STIP funded, I believe. And the recent project that was completed on Waterfront Drive in Eureka. So going forward now, talking about the draft 2026 STIP recommended project funding recommendations. So on October 2nd, the TAC reviewed the projects that were submitted by all the member agencies. So HCOG, after the final STIP funding estimates come in from the CTC, we send out a request for project proposals, if you will, a project solicitation, to which TAC member agencies respond with their projects that they want to be considered for STIP funding. We receive those, compile those, and that comes to the TAC as a item where we review the projects. The projects are reviewed for their consistency with the RTIP, or the RTP, I should say, for their consistency with at least one of the goals that is identified in there, which is the requirement for a project to be listed in the RTP in the first place. And so with that, I want to start a little bit about the funding availability. In the upper left-hand corner of this slide, you'll see this is from the staff report. This is the total amount of STIP shares, we call them, that are available for programming this year. In the bottom of that table, you'll see $2.334 million. So that is the amount, the target amount of funding that we are able to program in STIP cycle 2026. I will note, and this is just jumping ahead, that you'll see a funding recommendation for a number beyond that. One thing that HCOG and RTPAs are allowed to do is what they call overprogram, or borrow from future STIP shares in order to complete projects or program projects in the current time. What this basically means is that a subsequent STIP funding cycle, so 2028, would be short the amount of capacity that was overprogrammed in the previous STIP cycle. And just to provide some additional context, one of the reasons that this STIP cycle is a little bit lower than we would otherwise like is because in 2024 there was a recommendation to overprogram by almost $2 million. So over on the right-hand side, this is the STIP funding estimate that the CTC produces and that we receive. And the significance of it is, again, this is a biennial 5-year budgeted plan. And it's not always certain which of those 5 years is going to have STIP capacity. This all comes from the state highway account and is funded through fuel taxes and is basically the pot of funds that all of the state's program projects come through, that come through all of the COGs. And so the unfortunate thing about this particular 5-year cycle is for the next 3.5 fiscal years, there is no capacity in the STIP and in the state highway fund to do new programming capacity. So of the $2.334 million we're talking about programming in this cycle, or the target amount, I should say, those won't be for projects. They can't be programmed for use of those funds until fiscal years 29-30 and 30-31. That's when the STIP capacity exists for the new programming. I will note this doesn't affect previously programmed projects, just new programming like we're considering. So I want to jump through each project and just allow everybody to get a baseline familiarity with the projects that are being proposed regionally, and that will include a discussion of the funding request as made initially by the agency, not the amount that is recommended by the TAC. So first I'll start with Arcata's project. They call it their SAMSIP project. What that stands for is the South Arcata Multimodal Safety Improvement Project. So this project would convert the existing 255 101 interchange area to change the intersection control to roundabouts, and to, on the north side of the interchange, put a new separated Class 1 facility that connects the Arcata community on the east and west side of the highway. Additionally, this would include a number of improvements along the 255 Samoa Boulevard corridor for traffic calming and bike and pedestrian improvements. The city of Arcata made a request in the amount of $1.14 million, which would be PA&ED funding, which is the initial phase funding which would initiate the project. So that's the environmental document and the preliminary engineering designs. Next, to the city of Blue Lake, they made a request for just under $2.8 million to complete the final phase of their truck route project. So this is a roadway rehabilitation project and a bike and ped safety and access project that goes completely out to the end of Hatchery Road at the bridge there to where it becomes a county road. So this was funded in the preliminary design phase in the 2014 STIP. It was funded for phase 1 construction in the 2022 STIP, and the city of Blue Lake is asking for construction funding to finish the project. City of Eureka has an $850,000 construction funding request for their Hawthorne and Humboldt Class 3 Bike Boulevard project. So this would be converting those streets, and that alignment is shown in the picture there, into a Class 3 bike boulevard. This was identified as a top 3 priority in the city's recently completed bike master plan. But on that, I will note, because it was part of the 2024 bike master plan, this project is not currently listed in the 2022 RTP. So part of the recommendation by the TAC and what would be considered as part of the RTIP would be to amend a resolution to amend the 2022 RTP to now include this project, so it would be eligible for funding. Next, we have the city of Ferndale, who brought forward 3 roadway restoration and ADA improvement and sidewalk infill projects, one on Francis Street, one on Ocean Avenue, and one on Shaw. They brought in several projects of different cost magnitudes, recognizing the need to figure out which proposed project may best fit the funding constraints in this particular cycle. These projects are also not in the 2022 RTP. So as part of an adoption of the STIP and recommendation for funding, this would also be part of the resolution, similar to the city of Eureka, to add these projects to the 2022 RTP. Next is the city of Fortuna for their Kenmar and Ross Hill Road intersection improvement project. As the board is probably very aware, the city has been working for a number of years on the Kenmar interchange project, which focuses on the interchange improvements in the Caltrans right-of-way. This is the extension of that project, which would improve the existing signalized intersection at Kenmar and Ross Hill Road. So that's on the eastern end of the interchange area. So this project, as noted, would change the intersection control from signalized to roundabouts. It would do a number of pedestrian infills and some bike lane infills to bring non-motorized users from the Campton Heights neighborhoods and the Kenwood neighborhoods over to the future Great Redwood Trail and the Strongs Creek Trail, which are generally shown in those dotted dash and solid lines over more near the freeway. This project was identified in the city's 2021 LRSP and they are requesting $550,000 for PNAD phase. So again, environmental document and preliminary engineering. And lastly is the City of Trinidad. They have a $660,000 funding request for road rehabilitation on Edwards Street in Trinidad, which of course goes down to the harbor. This is a road that of course gets a lot of regional use given it goes down to the harbor and is in a tourist area. The city has done a number of projects through the years to try and extend the life of the pavement, but it has gotten to the point where it needs full rehabilitation in order to last much longer. Oh, there we go. So this table is from the staff report, and it's the summary of all of the agencies, their projects, the RTP priorities that are identified for them in the 2022 RTP, or in the case of Ferndale and Eureka's projects, the priorities that would be included if the amendment was granted to include those projects and fund them. And as you'll see, the total funding request for all of the projects comes out to about $7.4 million, which is well above, of course, our target programming amount of $2.3 million, and even above our maximum programming amount, which theoretically we could program up to about $5.6 or $5.8 million, I believe. But moving through the process, the TAC is recommending, and you'll see that on the right-hand column, in bold, those are the draft TAC funding recommendations that would program funding to the tune of $3 million. So again, the TAC is recommending over programming by about $650,000, which if approved in the RTIP would mean there would be about $650,000 that would not be available for programming consideration in the 2028 STIP. So those project funding recommendations are Arcata's project for PNED for SAMSIP in the amount of $700,000. The city has indicated that they can complete the proposed activities for that amount of funding. The city of Blue Lake for an additional phase of their truck route project. The slide we had up a minute ago actually showed their remaining work as 3 sub-phases, and they can do their most critical phase of work for $625,000. The city of Eureka, $750,000 to complete their Bike Boulevard project. The city of Ferndale, $425,000 to complete one of their 3 submitted projects, and that would be the one at Francis Street and Eugene Street, which the city has indicated is their priority. And lastly, the city of Fortuna for $500,000 to complete the PA&ED phase of their Kenmar and Ross Hill Road improvement project. I also wanted to provide just some additional context on the TAC recommendation. So first and foremost, I'll note that, of course, this is a deliberation that happens every 2 years, but this funding recommendation comes forward to the board and will come forward to the board as part of the RTIP in November as a unanimous recommendation from the TAC. And the overarching priority was to recognize that, of course, there's not nearly enough funding for the project need, and there's significant project need beyond what was submitted. We all know that. But their priority in this particular case with this amount of money was to not over-program too much, right? So to leave some capacity for consideration in future STIP years, to fund as many of the smaller construction projects as possible. And that's why you see the recommendations for a phase for the city of Blue Lake, the city of Eureka's project, and the city of Ferndale's project, while also advancing some of the larger major transportation improvement projects that would be kicked off with STIP dollars, and that is Arcata's SAMSIP project and the city of Fortuna's Kenmar and Ross Hill Road interchange improvement project. Just to give a little bit more context again to Blue Lake and Trinidad, which saw the largest reductions between the ask and the amounts recommended by the TAC. Like I said, the city of Blue Lake was prepared to further phase their truck route project, and they believe they can deliver their most important one for $625,000, and they can continue to solicit for future funding, or they have indicated they'll also be looking to see if they can supplement with ATP funding as a match to make their project go further. The city of Trinidad was willing to take a step back due to the fact that in recent STIP funding cycles, they've gotten some significant funding amounts to complete some restoration projects. So they were willing to take a step back, and the TAC does recommend making some investments in some of the other smaller communities in this particular cycle. With this, I'll just state clearly that in recommending Ferndale and Eureka's projects, the TAC is, of course, recommending an amendment to the 2022 RTP to include their projects. And again, over-programming to the tune of about $650,000 in order to achieve the goal of delivering as many projects as possible. If no overprogramming was considered, the project deliberation would have been much more difficult, and the 5 projects we're able to program and fund likely would have had to be 3, which was not something that the TAC wanted to move forward with. So next steps, this of course is a discussion item at this point just to make sure the board is aware of the projects and to be able to ask any questions earlier on in the process. This will be going back to the TAC as the draft RTIP in November. That's when we'll start to put these funding requests in the programming years and figuring out which projects would potentially see the dollars first. That'll come as the draft RTIP to be considered for adoption at the board level on November 20th. And after that, we as staff will finalize the RTIP and submit to the CTC by no later than mid-December, which is when we're required to do so. With that, I am happy to hand it back to the board and answer any questions you may have.
All right. Thank you. Is there any board questions or comments?
I just want to make sure I understand the over programming methodology there. So is it correct that for the next 3 years there will not be, are we spending the money that we would have gotten over the next 3 years at this point? Or
No, how it works is in context of overprogramming, it never produces more dollars. It just provides the ability to program against your future shares. So what it really amounts to when we overprogram is this 5-year cycle ends in fiscal year 30-31. What we're doing is borrowing a small amount of money from 31-32, but doing it in effort to keep the projects whole in their programming, because one of the requirements we have with the STIP guidelines is to fund a full phase of project work. So the funding recommendations we make cannot partially fund any project phase unless the city or the jurisdiction has identified what all the other funding sources are that are required to deliver it.
okay.
Yeah. And the reason there's no capacity in the next 3 years, quite frankly, is I think it's some of the budgetary issues that the state is facing. And I think that there was a lot of projects that languished through COVID and have since come in all at once. What that does to the state highway account is actually put it into a deficit this year. So the next couple of years, although they are projecting being revenue positive, they have to dig themselves out of the hole before that new programming can come in.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
I know there was a comment that came in from the public, and I'd like to hear their comment here today before.
Okay, we'll get to in public comment, but I think Mayor Sawatsky had
I think Natalie had a question
Oh,
first.
okay.
I was going to ask, I'm not sure that, I don't know if it went to staff, but that it was specifically concerns about VMT impacts, vehicle miles traveled impacts of the proposed Kenmar and Rossville Road project. So I'd just like to dig into that if we can.
Okay, we'll get that in public comment here in a minute. But I did have one question about if anybody's heard how the road charge program is going, because as we're running out of money, we're also seeing, I think it was 29% of all vehicles sold up to last week in California were zero emission vehicles, which is good. But there is no way to capture their impact on the infrastructure at this time.
I would not say that we're anywhere close to, transitioning. It's going to be a long process, but what we could do is we could ask for an update from maybe, we'll figure out the right person to update us on like where we are in the process and how far out they think it is. Yeah,
I think somewheres in the last year, maybe 18 months, we had a presentation, and their contact info is included in there. So I think we can find someone to give us an update.
I think it was Lauren Brahota from Caltrans that gave that presentation, and we can see if she's the right person.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my understanding is she's still the one leading it up. I did participate in a workshop that had, among other things, updates from the CTC on the road user charge, and I think similar to Councilmember Atkins Salazar's comment, there's not a whole lot more to report beyond what they're still working on, is identifying the alternatives and really figuring out where to go forward from there. Of course, some of them are more controversial than others as it comes to tracking vehicles potentially and really looking at actual miles traveled on the road, which is the model that would maybe best suit, really charging everybody appropriately for the amount they're using the infrastructure. Happy to set up something and bring that back to the board. And in the meantime, as far as it looks with the STIP, is we do anticipate small declines cycle over cycle. Right now it's flat because the presence of zero emission vehicles is basically offset by inflation and fuel costs. So those two things are kind of keeping it afloat for a short period of time, but we do anticipate steady and continued decline beyond this cycle without the transition to a new user charge.
All right, thank you. And is there any public comment on this item?
One quick question over here. How long ago were the conversations had around the percentage that Blue Lake would receive and how the project could move forward?
This was part of the discussion at the TAC meeting on October 2nd. Mm-hmm.
Any other board comments that I missed or PAC member comments? Okay. Is there any public comment? I don't see. Oh, there.
There we go. Good afternoon, Colin Fisk with CRTP. Sounds like most of you received the email, so glad to hear that. I'm just going to briefly kind of reiterate some of the points from the email. We do think that there are a number of worthy projects under consideration for funding, but given where we are with limited funding and great needs that are not just to maintain the existing system, but to really transform it into something that encourages active transportation and transit and that is much safer for everybody, we feel that we should be prioritizing projects that objectively accomplish and promote multiple of our RTP goals in a meaningful way. So regarding the proposed projects, we do think that the Arcata SAMSIP project has the potential to be the most transformative for the greatest number of people. Really, a lot of people use that interchange, and to improve the safety and access across the highway there, promote mode shift for Arcata and surrounding areas. We also think that the Eureka Bike Boulevard project and the Blue Lake Railroad and Hatchery Road project would have produced significant improvements towards several of the RTP targets. The Ferndale paving project, we think the impacts would be relatively small, certainly significant for folks with disabilities in that community. Unfortunately, we do have concerns about the Fortuna project. The project description makes it clear that it is primarily designed to increase vehicular capacity and reduce congestion and encourage future growth. And pretty much by definition, that means increased vehicle miles traveled, which is not compatible with state and regional goals, including the goals in the RTP. And I went into a little bit more in my email, but we also have concerns about the design concepts when it comes to the roundabout itself for pedestrian safety as well as bicyclist safety. And so for that reason, we don't really agree that the project would support mode shift access or the Vision Zero goals. Just in general about the way these recommendations are come to, the TAC develops the recommendations really from my observation, not based on assessment of the project's alignment with HCOG policies or RTP goals, but based on negotiation between the members as to what is fair for each jurisdiction to receive. When it comes to the policies and goals, the TAC members basically self-attest which types of goals they believe are promoted by each project, and there's no weighting or prioritization or third-party review. And in this case, it doesn't seem like the TAC really considered those things in their recommendations. So Of course, equitable distribution of funds among the jurisdictions is important, but there's no articulated statement of what is fair or equitable or what metric is being used. And, some of the types of equity that you could measure are certainly not met. Just to give one example, these recommendations would amount to spending about $307 per resident in Ferndale and about $29 per resident in Eureka. So, how are we measuring the impacts here? In any case, as I said, I think equitable distribution of funds among jurisdictions isn't the only consideration, because if it is, then having other policies in the RTP and other adopted goals really don't mean that much. So we would encourage you to modify the TAC recommendations and prioritize funding towards projects that objectively promote the adopted policies and priorities, including the safe and sustainable transportation targets in the RTP. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment or board comment?
Well, I do have a follow-up on that, because that was I'm part of the comment, I guess, for our director. Do you see a disconnect in the policies that the board sets forward in the RTP and the recommendations that the TAC comes up with? Because obviously there should be synergy in that. So I'm curious to know your opinion.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think maybe before jumping right into that, something that might be helpful, and I'd like to spend just at least a few moments with the board, is to dive in a little bit more on Ferndale and Fortuna's project, and maybe to provide a little bit more context, because certainly there's more to some of those projects and why they are viewed as regional priorities that are consistent with the RTP that is part of the definition. So, Amy, if you could bring up the slide that shows, let's start with the city of Ferndale. Well, you know what? Actually, if you go to the very last slide. So this is just some additional contextual information, and something that is always helpful to think about with the STIP are funding cycles over time. Because although we know we do it every 2 years, and realistically there's not a whole lot of funding that comes through, and most of the time what we're talking about is funding a phase of work, when most projects will have 3 to 4 phases of work ultimately to get to completed construction on the ground. I guess I can drive once it's launched, sorry. So as we think about investments or, projects that are going to be put into communities, this right here is a table that shows the STIP regional investments between 2016 and 2026, so the last 6 cycles. And what you can see is, realistically from the investment amounts, the larger agencies always see the lion's share. That's where a lot of the more transformational projects are. Of course, that includes a lot of projects like Arcata's Sunset Interchange projects, the interchange projects in Fortuna, a number of projects in Eureka, including the Bike Boulevard projects and the Beta Zoo Trail, so on and so forth. The city of Ferndale, again, you can think about that as $300 in one cycle a year as an investment to their number of residents. But if you think about programming over time and trying to invest in areas all over the county, it would be, the only investment that community would have seen in well over 10 years. I believe it's probably been closer to 20 since any STIP funding found its way there. So again, if you look at it more, think about, some people use geologic time as a term. If you think about it in the geologic time of the STIP, there's still relatively small investments, and the lion's share are going to the places where more users are experiencing the impact of those funds. Up to Fortuna's project, and I guess I can go into some detail on this and also recognize I may be uniquely suited to do so. One of the biggest priorities in the RTP is to make investments, and you can actually find this in land use element 5 and 6, is to specifically identify and make investments that can leverage and cause responsible development patterns to occur. So that's looked at, of course, as infill development. That's looked at as development that does jobs housing balance, which is one of the major RENA topic items that we tackle, and investments that will allow for diverse, robust, and flexible into the future commercial mixed use residential types of projects. So one of the major issues that this project would help work towards solving is the redevelopment of the city's mill site. which is a 75-acre site that's been vacant for some time, and it represents one of the best potential uses within the entire county to do commercial mixed use and to do job investments, similar to what is being considered in the port area of Eureka right now. Or, of course, with the investments in Cal Poly Humboldt to bring more jobs and infrastructure there. So one of the city of Fortuna's big goals is economic development and ultimately being able to provide more jobs for residents in Fortuna, because right now Fortuna is a net exporter of workers to the tune of about 2,000 per day. And the mill district-specific plan that the city recently completed is projected to be able to provide upwards of 1,500 jobs, depending on the type of build-out. So as it pertains to VMT, one of the big views here is not only is this a project like this consistent with the land use goals of, again, trying to do infill, trying to locate jobs closer to housing, but if you provide jobs nearby where people live, by its very nature, over time, it will reduce VMT by having a large portion of the population of the county not having to leave where they live to go find employment. One of the areas of just mode shift and connectivity, and I do want to say these, the public comment was very correct. These aren't necessarily measured by metrics when they're put forward. They are put forward by the local agency who certifies which metric or RTP priority are relevant to them. One of those is mode shift, and of course, as the board is aware, one of the major things that both Arcata and Fortuna have been working on is bike and pedestrian connectivity over the freeway interchanges, which were installed in the 50s and the 60s. So this whole area is a dead zone right now for bike and peds to be able to get from the city's most populous residential areas down to the Riverwalk area, to the Levee Trail, to what will be the future Great Redwood Trail, which is located next to the highway. And so this is another key cog in closing that bike and pedestrian gap to be able to carry residents to the Great Redwood Trail in the future, and also so that Great Redwood Trail can connect in and bring people into Fortuna, because again, that's one of the major intents of the Great Redwood Trail project is that greater connectivity. So these are just some additional considerations that are being put forward in regards to the consistency with the RTP, because of course, while there are a lot of goals in the RTP, one of the main ones is also to promote responsible development, to promote infill development, to locate jobs as near housing as possible, which this would help to achieve. And as the board has probably seen through discussions at your board and council level, there's a lot of RENA that's coming up now too, and thinking about how this is done, how places can be redeveloped. And I do believe there's a safe and sustainable transportation target goal that specifically is targeting getting it to where at some point up to 80% of county residents live within a walkable or bikeable distance from their place of employment. That's not a possibility right now in Fortuna, and Fortuna is working very hard to try and switch that paradigm and make it to where all of those things can be true for those residents down there as well. And this project would be key in not only solving some of their existing issues, but the issues they would face in ultimately achieving the long-term goals. So if there's any more specific questions to that, I'm happy to answer to that, and happy to talk about any of the other projects too. But of course, the Ferndale one and certainly the Fortuna one were the subject of more of the comment. So
yeah, I would add also that the Vision Zero is a safety metric, and since to my knowledge, because I went to work at the city in 1993, there were people walking to the jobs in the Riverwalk area, and the people that were working at the CCC Center in the road in the morning, sometimes in the rain where vehicles can't see, underneath the overpass and then around the corner. And even now, that's still happening. So this is designed to address that, to get people out of the traveled way onto a sidewalk that works. And then also at the commute hours right now, it's not uncommon for the traffic to queue all the way up onto the freeway because they cannot get through that bottleneck that has existed since they built the freeway. It hasn't been changed. At one time, some of the traffic could exit the freeway at Drake Hill and come down Eel River Drive, but that exit was closed in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it's no longer available. So everything has to exit either 12th Street, which is a bottleneck, or Kenmar, which is a bottleneck. Fortuna didn't create it, but since it's in Fortuna, we're responsible to remediate it. And that's what this is for, is to remediate a bottleneck that has existed for 30 years. And that is our goal, is to get our citizens, as well as keeping jobs in Fortuna, stopping the exported jobs, keeping traffic off the freeway, which will itself cut down VMT by remediating the intersection. The people that want to come to Fortuna to just right now the existing shopping areas, because it is a shopping hub for Southern Humboldt, will be able to get in and out easier and will not be stuck idling in the roadway waiting for traffic to alleviate. So that's how this project came about. So, and I don't know if anybody else has any comments on this.
Can you leave that figure back up for a second? Thanks. I guess there's discussion about the pedestrian and bike connectivity, but these are just roundabouts. And then where does, I think what I hear you saying is that this project is part of a bigger plan to make those connections happen, because this is really a very small piece of that in terms of like, I get what I'm understanding now what Colin's saying. He's saying it's like, hey, it's like you're going to have all these trails and all these other things. This is really just like a small piece of those kind of bigger visions around connectivity. Is there a time frame for those? Is there a plan for those? I mean, I hear Mayor Johnson's concerns about people walking from one side to the other and that connectivity, but this won't really actually deliver that in its by itself. So can you frame that in terms of like what are the real plans to get to connect to all those things?
Yeah, so what you'll see here in this figure, and this was part of the project study report that the city submitted, in the red line work, you'll see the design as it currently exists for the Kenmar Interchange Improvement Project. So that is a STIP-funded project that has been in the delivery cycle through the city with STIP and HCOG funding since 2018. That project, due to funding constraints, had to focus on a terminus, where it would end and where the improvements would be. And the availability at that time would only take it to where you see the transition between the red and the blue line work on that figure. But that doesn't solve the whole problem. Part of it is to fix the other area, to which, as Chair Johnson noted, Caltrans did close the Drake Hill interchange in the late 2000s, and that created a lot more of an issue. And unfortunately, it was not something that was looked at or studied in their environmental document at that time. The impacts that closing that on and off ramp at Drake Hill would have as part of the overpass project at 36. So those are the two portions of the transportation system. Intertwined in that is the city's goal. The city did a master plan that was, again, funded in part through HCOG for what's called the Strongs Creek Trail. So that's a Class 1 facility that generally goes east-west. It goes from the River Lodge to Newburgh Park. If you look at the solid yellow line in this figure, that's one of the major design components of the Kenmar Interchange project, is to fit the trail there, because right now there's no way you could actually fit the trail within the existing footprint. So that trail would go through and connect over. But one of the last pieces that would be included in this particular intersection improvement project is carrying people from the Drake Hill neighborhoods and from the eastern end of the Kenmar neighborhoods to the trail features themselves. Because right now, you can only go northbound or southbound on Ross Hill Road, which the city about 10 to 12 years ago did a road diet in that area and put in buffered bike lanes and walking lanes. But right now there's significant gaps in the network as it surrounds the interchange. So even when those trails go in, without improvements here, there's still significant gaps between probably 40% of the city's housed population. And getting to the John Campbell Trail, Strongs Creek Trail, or getting to the Great Redwood Trail, and certainly getting across the freeway. So we're always talking about funding constraints and how you have to piece something down to something you can deliver and move it forward. This is just the continuation of what ultimately is a much larger project that the city is actively looking at. So there's this project, there's the interchange project. The city has every year an ATP cycle comes around, is looking for funding in order to do the Strongs Creek Trail portion of that project. The city has been in discussions with partnering with the Great Redwood Trail Agency and has been working with them closely because, of course, the Great Redwood Trail runs right through the middle of the Kenmar portion and would tie into a lot of it as well. So they're looking for partnership opportunities. And the other thing that is kind of baked into this too is the city working with HTA to try and provide another bus stop, because that's one of the design components in this area too, is a directly off-highway bus stop that could help accommodate some more express routes potentially on RTS to try and cut down on some ultimate travel time. So they're looking at putting a what's called somewhat of a bus stop, quote unquote, mobility hub along with kind of a gateway for the Great Redwood Trail. So
You seem very versed in this.
there's a lot of it. Well, again, I was and I do want to make one point clear about this too. You know, I took personally, of course, I came here from being the public works director and the city engineer of the city of Fortuna. And full disclosure, the project study report was done under my responsible care as the lead engineer. I am completely outside of the funding recommendation as it comes to this project. I can speak to its merits, but as it goes beyond that, I think is the board's decision. As it goes beyond that is the city of Fortuna's and the tax decision.
I'm prepared to move forward with the recommendation that's been made, but I think the point that brought by Colin and Citizens for Responsible Transportation Priorities is, I think that you're spending $5 million on this. It just kind of like takes care of the car part, really. I mean, it has intersection to all of these other parts, and so I appreciate that criticism of it. And I'm just wondering, does Fortuna have roundabouts now, or these be the first roundabouts in the city of Fortuna?
Fortuna has.
Are you ready for the blowback on that?
It's been brought up.
Okay.
People in the community know about it.
Okay. Well, I would let you know, with your rent control and your 4-day work week and now roundabouts, welcome to the.
And I would also say, as far as some of this goes, when you look at the trails on the map that you were up there, the broken and the solid both lead to a protected crossing at Strongs Creek Boulevard that can get them to the retail and restaurants in there. It eventually will lead to the John Campbell Memorial Trail, which will take you out to tie into the Headwaters Trail. There's already a monument sign and a marker for people to meet and then head out to the Headwaters sign there. We're just trying to connect the two. So right now people can start at River Lodge and walk around, go through and out and that way. So this is as you say, this is one piece of a large project.
Okay. Mr. Chairman?
I had a question.
Yes.
Well, I just wanted to thank Colin for the comments and all the work and time that you guys usually take to comment on our agenda pretty much every month. And they're always very articulate and thought-provoking observations. So definitely appreciate that. And I had a question when you mentioned the VMT. I'm not an expert in transportation. Does it make any difference whether the vehicle is like a zero emission vehicle? Do they still get kind of negative points, or is it just gas powered vehicles that we're trying to discourage?
You know, the intent of how VMT is now a CEQA impact that is analyzed for transportation, where prior to the full enactment of the bill, which I believe was 2018 or 2019 is when they came fully into play, traffic impacts through CEQA were looked as level of service, which is a measurement of congestion. Now it's looked at as VMT, or vehicle miles traveled, in the hopes of again, doing projects and trying to move development patterns forward to reduce people's dependability on having to drive to and from destinations, be that work or whatever else.
Okay.
And to speak to it being zero emissions versus non-zero emissions, a lot of VMT really comes out of the state's greenhouse gas reduction target. So a lot of the intent is really as it pertains more to the internal combustion engines, not that there's not consideration for it in zero emission vehicles. And there are some goals and policies in the RTP that would look at it as total VMT regardless of the vehicle as well. But the intent of the state legislation is more in line with the climate goals and the GHGs and the transportation sector.
I see. Thank you. And then just one other quick observation. With the commenter, I tend to agree that the terms equitable treatment and equity have been very popular in recent times when we're talking about policy. And without clear definitions, those terms basically can mean whatever the person who's applying it thinks it should mean. And I think that's a little bit, I don't think that's good policy. It can lead to some very arbitrary results. So I appreciate that aspect of the comment too.
Supervisor Arroyo.
Thank you. I appreciate the conversation around this. I think a lot of in my experience watching this board and then being on the PAC, it's been a lot, the TAC is comprised of public works folks who do a little bit of public works horse trading and bring recommendations. And there's often not a lot of discussion about what these recommendations are, how they're prioritized. And it sounds like I'm hearing an inkling of moving forward with this recommendation today, but I do, in the spirit of the comments, want to bring up that, the STIP, the State Transportation Improvement Program, and Regional Transportation Improvement Program funds are not the only, distributed funds that where there's a little bit of a moment for me, I'll say, of going, because we also have the Local Transportation Fund, which comes from the Transportation Development Act, and that is, where it's heavily used for transit, and the jurisdictions that use the entirety of that funding for transit then don't get to spend the money on streets and roads because they've used all of it for transit. While streets and roads are available uses, if the jurisdiction doesn't have unmet transit needs, that's disproportionate in our communities. So I just think it's helpful to think about that and to say that, because some communities have and pay into the cost of transit, and then there are communities that don't have transit. And part of the reason why the bus stop is planned for this intersection and Fortuna is that currently the Redwood Transit bus stops in Fortuna quite a few places because the Fortuna transit system is a senior bus that is only is not available to all riders. And so while functionally people are kind of let on it, it's not formally available to everyone. And so we're going to have to retool how our bus goes through Fortuna because it's pretty inefficient for the Redwood Transit riders, and it takes people a really long time to get from point A to point B on that route. And so, the hope is that Fortuna will be providing transit service, and so utilizing some of those funds for all riders. And Ferndale, doesn't have transit going to Ferndale, so is able to use those dollars for streets and roads. So I think it's helpful to think about that as an equity piece. It's not what we're talking about here, but it's also funding that comes and gets distributed regionally. And there's a real difference in how communities are able to utilize those funds based on those services that they provide. So I think that that enters into the mix too. And I think it speaks to potentially a greater conversation that this board might want to consider having in the future about those different key funding streams and what to Councilmember Kenny's point, Mayor Pro Tem Kenny, what equity means in our work, and I think that's a great question, because our availability to tap into these funds really differs by jurisdiction. So thanks for thinking about that in the mix too.
Well, kind of looking at your comment, we do provide funding to HTA for transit service, and we do operate the senior bus. There's a minute amount left over after that to pay to buy cold mix to patch potholes in the winter, but we do contribute to transit in Fortuna.
Thank you. We Fortuna and Blue Lake both contribute to Redwood Transit operations going through their communities. Yeah, thanks.
And I'll just jump in just for something too, just to keep us a little bit on the path, but then maybe bring us back to. We are currently part of discussions with HTA in the city of Fortuna, who is going to be potentially considering opening up as a full public transit operator. It's not something that has been brought before their council. We're just looking at some options there. So Fortuna is one of many local agencies where their TDA funding no longer supports anything other than their transit related activities. A lot of agencies have moved in that direction, and Arcata, of course, recently experienced that, and others as well. So it is a tough area, and it's all tied to fuel tax, of course, too, which is a diminishing revenue source. But that is something that they're working on, and if it gets to that point, would be something that would, of course, go in front of the city, but also come back to this board for further discussion on what that transition to that transit system would look like. So,
Okay. Well, back to the matter at hand. We do have a request to provide direction to staff to add the items to the RTIP and to continue on programming the STIP. So.
And I'd say at this time, again, if there's any direction from the board, if there's anything that you would like the TAC to speak about or consider, because of course it's going to go back to the TAC as the RTIP at the November meeting before coming back to the board again in the November meeting 2 weeks after that. So any thoughts or direction you would like to provide at this time is more than welcome.
I have a quick question. The overprogrammed part, what impact does that have?
What that'll do is we get usually, and when I say we, the region gets somewhere between $2.5 to $3 million per year in the STIP. So in a 2-year cycle, we usually have somewhere around $5 to $6 million to program. If, let's say in theory that in 2028 we would have $5 million to program, off the top of that $5 million would be the $650,000 we overprogrammed this time around. So all it does is you're borrowing from yourself in the future. One of the reasons it can be a good idea sometimes, though, is because the STIP is a bank account, sometimes you can get your projects funded earlier if they are programmed earlier. And that way you're doing them in earlier years dollars as opposed to more expensive dollars in the future. It's the same amount of money, but if you can do them in earlier years, sometimes you get the benefit of doing them earlier in the inflation curve. So.
And so what is the limit of this overage, basically? I'm saying at some point, this is not a good financial tool. Where's that threshold?
Yeah, so you're allowed to overprogram an entire year, which would mean that this time around, HCOG could 100% consider actually programming up to like $5.6, $5.8 million. What the TAC is recommending is to overprogram just enough to fully fund phases of the projects under consideration, which would take a little bit of money away from what could be considered for new programming capacity in 2028. Okay. But a lot of agencies will consistently overprogram, and all you're doing is borrowing from your future self in a way. But again, unlike borrowing, sometimes the interest rate works in the or in the COG's favor because you're getting it earlier in the delivery cycle.
So, do we have a recommendation for them? I would move that you continue on with the tax recommendation, TAC, and staff recommendation, but that's one.
Yeah, no motion needed, just
Well,
just direction.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that's direct. That's my inkling.
I support that.
I'm good here.
I would say that the comments from CRTP be forwarded with this back to the TAC and see how they might respond to that. Thank you.
Can do.
Yeah, I like that approach also, just making sure that the TAC is aware of other ways to look at these things. And I thought your summation of the bigger picture was a pretty good response to the comments, but the TAC is really they have a lot to say in how the decision's made, so that I guess they should be aware of this too, and they probably are, but.
Yeah, they are. We received very similar comments, or that I should say the TAC received, and they were distributed to the TAC for their consideration. But I am more than happy to take, of course, this back as also direction from the board to review and discuss those as well. So.
And I would say it's an interesting observation that some might have of the TAC, that there's horse trading amongst public works departments. It's a technical advisory committee, and I think we just have to be careful about what we perceive to be fair in a technical sense, because really that's a political question. I think that's more the job of this part of the beast. Mm-hmm. That's all. So thanks.
And Supervisor Arroyo, you have it's a PAC recommendation.
It is. Oh, were you asking me for additional input?
Just if
I shouldn't have used the word horse trading. I apologize.
I'm recognizing your position as a PAC member.
Oh, thank you. I said what I needed to say, and I support the motion.
Okay.
Well, just to add to kind of the discussion, if we're talking about like negotiations amongst the TAC, one of the things that I've appreciated is the looking out for trying to take into account the resources that we all get, and some of the smaller regions that get less. And so sometimes the percentage isn't always proportional by population when they're dividing up projects, but it's also by access that smaller jurisdictions have. And I do, and that's been my understanding going on for a very long time. And I think that's I like that. I think it's generous and cooperative.
Yeah, and I guess just to provide some further context or clarification to that, what the TAC really tries to do is recognize that, again, these things move slowly, and sometimes it's a community or a project has a transformative project that's ready to be done, similar to what's happening in the city of Blue Lake right now. If you look at the city of Blue Lake's population or any of number of things, that it wouldn't necessarily warrant an investment of that size if you were to consider it as some sort of formulaic distribution, which I'll be very clear is not the intent of the STIP. It's fully based in a project's merits and how it develops and delivers regional goals. I think the tax approach, I mean, if it was loosely termed horse trading, is to know that sometimes a project will come up in an agency and it's compelling and everybody can agree that it deserves investment in that year and it's a good project, again, similar to a project like in Blue Lake. But, those can't exist all the time. So there's just an acknowledgement of where funding has gone in the past. Again, as you see in the slide, the larger agencies take certainly the lion's share of the funding year over year because that's where a lot of the bang for the buck is. And you can look up and down a lot of the distributed funding sources we have, whether it's RSTP or, TDA is actually very formulaic. That's the one that's fully formalized out of population numbers. But there's other ones and there's gives and takes. Where certain where certain agencies get more in this one and less in this one, and it's somewhat the nature of the beast, and it's not the intent of all of them to operate that way. So
Just to be clear, actually, I would say that the population part of what this conversation is not one that I actually subscribe to, because not every jurisdiction is serving just the people within the jurisdiction. There's a lot of not just visitors, but people passing through the jurisdiction that are receiving the benefits of those infrastructure, and so of that infrastructure. So transformative doesn't necessarily mean just for within the town or that whatever the landscape is. It's transformative. I'm hoping that it's transformative from a kind of regional perspective. So appreciate that. That's all you're going to get from me today. I think we've dragged this one out pretty far. Thanks.
So I think you have direction.
thank you very much.
And with that, we will reconvene by motion as the HCOG board and approve the PAC recommendations. So I would entertain a motion to reconvene as HCOG board.
Move to reconvene.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Okay. So now we have staff and PAC member reports with the executive director first.
Excellent. Thank you. So I will be having Amy launch something. So she's certainly, we're enjoying a lot of her assistance here this evening. And the main things I want to keep the board and the public aware of are a number of meetings and community workshops and council presentations that'll be coming up involving various works here at HCOG. So the first one is one that's being led by our associate planner, Stevie Luther. Again, very thankful to have him back and getting right back in and helping with all our work at HCOG. He has recently set up the Unmet Transit Needs Hearing. It felt like we just concluded it, and here we are again. Of course, it's an annual TDA process. So those are scheduled, and we have them here. They are available on our website as well, but we have all of our hearings, or close to all of our hearings, scheduled with all of the local agencies. We can make sure, if this hasn't already, that it is, of course, shared with the board as well. Moving on to our next item. This coming Monday in McKinleyville at Azalea Hall is our community workshop in regards to the RTP update. So as the board saw in some previous presentations looking at the RTP update, we're working on scheduling a community workshop space where we can, again, engage with the community and get some public input and really talk in a more focused sense on a few of the main items that are part of the RTP update. The items we're going to be focusing on in this particular workshop include Vision Zero, because of course HCOG is currently in the lead in a countywide Vision Zero plan. There's going to be housing, RENA, and land use, because of course we are also in the RENA process. We're going to have some tabling on community engagement, on transit and transportation, and then on infrastructure investment in financing. So again, that'll be 5:30 to 7:30, October 20th at Azalea Hall. We'd love to see as many folks show up for that as can. Next is our RENA process. So as the board is aware, at the September meeting, the board identified what we'll call a draft preferred alternative for RENA allocation to all of the member jurisdictions as part of HCOG. So we are in the 60-day public comment period, which will include a formal public hearing at the November 20th meeting to receive further public comment on the identified preferred alternative for allocation, in addition to review and discuss any public comment received to date. We'll wrap that up also with some preliminary contact we're doing with HCD right now to get their take on our proposed preferred alternative. And that will come back to the board in December, hopefully, for a recommendation to formally adopt a RENA distribution method. And lastly, you'll see here at the You'll see here at the bottom, our senior regional planner, Una Smith, has been diligently working on our Vibrant Neighborhoods project, which included the LTS presentation, which was that mapping for bike and pedestrian level of stress that was presented a few board meetings ago. One of the next major items we're doing in there is the community workshops, the walk audits, and the speaker series. So we have sent this out as well. We'll make sure the board has it, but we can confirm the venue at this point will be the Wharfinger building here in Eureka. From 5:30 to 8:30, there will be the speaker series that includes talks by Victor Dover, Dan Burden, and Josh Meyer, all renowned experts in their field of expertise and part of our grant-funded Vibrant Neighborhoods project. So with that, that is all I have to report.
Any questions for or comment? Okay.
Can you send out invitations to the board and to the alternates for those two events?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Okay. A Caltrans report. I thought I saw Ms. Allstrand there.
Hi. Yes, I'm not here tonight because I'm not feeling well, but no updates from me. But I just wanted to say that I thought that was really good discussion during the RTIP section.
Well, thank you. Okay, so we come also to Supervisor Arroyo.
Thank you. I just wanted to highlight that the free fares in July, it takes a couple months for us to get all the data together about our stats and financial statements for performance of our systems. And so our board was able to look at the July outcomes. And across all of our systems, we gave nearly 54,000 free rides in the month of July, which is pretty cool. That's a pretty great number of riders, and saw a nearly 20% change over the year prior. Often in the summer, we don't have as many student riders, and people are traveling, and so it's kind of a dip in ridership at times, but the free promotion was really cool to get some folks experiencing transit. So just wanted to highlight that again. 54,000 nearly in a month is I don't know that folks who don't ride transit regularly realize how many rides we give. So I always like to point that out.
All right, thank you. Is there any board member reports?
I'd just like to thank everyone for voting to allow us to use those funds to fix the bridge and repair the bridge. I'm going to be looking at a long-term maintenance plan for that and make sure we have that in place. So the bridge is maintained and functioning, because multiple generations of Blue Lakers have used that bridge, and it's a key point of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, with that, we've reached our end of our meeting for this day. Thank you for participating, and we will adjourn.